Welcome back to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a SafeBreach podcast. I'm your host, Tova Dvorin, joined as always by our resident breaker of things, Adrian Culley.
Happy to be here, Tova, though I have to say the breaking part of my job is getting a lot more interesting lately.
I bet. Today we're diving into a major shift in the industry yet again. That seems to be a theme we're running into the last couple of months. We've all heard the buzz about continuous threat exposure management, or CTEM, but most organizations are still struggling to move past the vulnerability hamster wheel. To talk about how we're actually solving that and breaking free of the cycle, we have a very special guest, our very own VP Product at SafeBreach, Koby Barr.
Thanks, Tova. Great to be on the show. It's an exciting time at SafeBreach. We've been watching industry events closely, and it's clear that the detect and patch model is shifting and breaking away. It doesn't work anymore. And teams don't need more data. They need a pilot. They need someone to guide them through the process. That's exactly what we're intending to do here.
That's right, Koby. That leads us to some big news. We are officially launching SafeReach Helm, the AI validation layer for CTEM. It's your co-pilot. SafeReach Helm is also the bedrock of our new solution, CTEM by SafeReach. Adrian, as the offensive guy, what was your first thought when Koby showed you the blueprint for this?
You always say the nicest things about me, Tova. Honestly, relieved. SafeBreach Helm is a large language model LLM-driven engine that finally connects the dots between the 5 pillars of CTEM. It's the brain that sits on top of our Adversarial Exposure Validation, or AEV, engine.
Exactly, Adrian. I could have not said it better. SafeBreach Helm isn't just a chatbot wrapper. We're not asking LLM how to do scoping. We actually specialize. We have a specialized AI designed to navigate the complexity of the exposure lifecycle.
And we'll be right back.
Let's go into some more detail. And let's do this by actually looking at it at a high level by the CTEM pillars. Now, there's 5 pillars of CTEM for those of you who aren't familiar, and we'll go through them a little bit slowly so that we can get the full picture. So the first pillar is scoping. Now, Koby, from a product perspective, why is scoping so hard for our customers?
Because the attack surface is infinite, right? It's changing all the time. It's evolving. Attack surface is something that is dynamic and not static. And that's something that needs to resonate with everyone who's intending to protect an organization. With SafeReach Helm, we're talking about dynamic, proactive security and not something static. And that's really important to mention. But also resources are finite, right? At the end of the day, most CISOs don't know exactly what are the top business critical digital pathways, for example. If you don't know what you're protecting, you're just guarding the wind. That's exactly the point. Scoping is all about knowing what the critical assets are, who's the owner of different assets within the organization, and really understanding what kind of threats are relevant for my organization.
Exactly, Koby. If you don't have visibility, if you don't know what's there, how are you going to begin to protect it? And from the offensive side, if I see a company guarding everything equally, I know exactly where to strike. They're spread too thin.
That's where SafeBreach Helm comes in scoping. It ingests your unique business context, right? And knows how to translate into something that is scoped and you can actually run in your environment.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that instead of a manual workshop that's obsolete in 20 minutes, instead of trying to figure out exactly where you should be deploying your tools and being able to protect your critical assets, SafeReach Helm creates that dynamic scope for you in minutes.
It keeps the scope aligned with the business as it evolves. That's, I think, the critical point here. It is ensuring that the rest of the CTEM cycle stays focused on what matters.
Okay. And after scoping, we have the second pillar, which is discovery, and that's refining things a little bit further. Adrian, you often say that vulnerabilities or vulnerability management is only half the story.
Most, Tova. Our research indicates that nearly 40% of actionable exposures aren't CVEs at all. They're toxic combinations. It's an overprivileged identity paired with a misconfigured cloud bucket and a forgotten VPN entry point.
And we have a name for our next cocktail, toxic combination on 5. Koby, how does SafeBreach Helm handle that kind of complexity during the discovery process?
I think the point is that traditional scanners are siloed, right? They don't talk to each other. And I think that's a big gap that we're intending to solve. They see a medium vulnerability and move on, right? But SafeBreach Helm LLM architecture allows it to perform cross-domain analysis, right? To really kind of reads the configuration of your environment, and at the end of the day, find the hidden exposures that the shadow ID or orphan account, for example, that creates a bridge for attackers. You're not just finding holes, it's finding the connective tissue of an attack. And that's, I think, the differentiator here. So it's not just knowing that there's a vulnerable asset in my environment, but also to understand the context of that asset. And that's pretty much what discovery in the context of Helm talks about.
Interesting. And listeners, if you go to the SafeReach website and stay with us, you'll be able to see what that looks like in practice. You could actually see it on a map. It's very informative, and it's exactly what you need.
And we'll be right back.
Now, once you have all of that information in front of you, it's just a lot of data. It's important data, but it's a lot of data. So the biggest pain point here, I think, is the next pillar, which is prioritization. We're all tired of your top 10 list that contains 5,000 items, like a product marketer's to-do list. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, the prioritization paradox. Not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts. And if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. Many tools just look at the CVSS score, but context is key. If the CVSS 9.8 on an isolated air-gapped machine is less dangerous than a CVSS 6.0 on a public-facing web server. Context, context, context.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't not describe it better, but this is where SafeBreach Helm changes the game. It applies adversarial logic to the prioritization phase. So just like a real attacker would identify, to Adrian's example, would identify air-gapped asset, it's not pretty much where I want to start. So it takes the mountain of data from discovery and asks, is this actually exploitable in this specific environment? And that's how we kind of go after prioritization in that context.
And how exactly does it do that? I mean, I could see where the human element could help or hurt here, but take us a little bit behind the scenes. Take us a little bit under the hood.
Perfect. It uses LLM to, at the end of the day, process real-time threat intelligence and maps it against your internal security controls. It identifies the choke points that SafeBreach Helms tells the user you have 10,000 bugs, but only 12 are on the validated to your crown jewels. It turns a mountain of noise into a specific handful surgical strikes. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. Now, don't think about only feed from threat intelligence, feed from ASM, EASM, from vulnerability management, or for any other scanners you have in your environment.
Right. And I think it's important to note, too, that this is customized to your specific environment and input. It's not just a general scan of those different feeds. It's what's customized for you. It's telling you what your specific attack paths are that you have to prioritize right now. And that's super critical. But that takes us to the next pillar, right? Which is validation. That's the SafeReach DNA, the SafeReach specialty. Adrian, this is where you and SafeBreach Helm have already started working together. Tell us a little bit about some of those pilot projects you're doing.
So we've talked about not everything that counts can be counted, not everything that can be counted counts. We get to the eye of the storm here, which is what actually matters. This is the AV phase, adversarial exposure validation. Validation is the proof of the concept, differentiating from proof of concept there. We don't just guess if a control works, we test it, we validate it. But the challenge has always been knowing which tests to run out of the thousands of simulations we have in our playbook.
I want to add to it that on its own, SafeBreach Exposure Validation Platform delivers a very powerful validation capabilities. It's been leveraged by the largest organization in the world, and this is essentially our bread and butter, right? We know how to do validation really well. SafeBreach Helm builds on that foundation by incorporating the additional context from scoping, integration, and exposure hub tools that we've talked about before, and then translating it into actionable inputs for the platform using natural language. But the statement I want to make here is that there's no CTEM without validation. And that's something that should resonate with everybody who's listening to this podcast today, that the validation is where we bring our tremendous value here, and how important it is to kind of close the loop on CTEM.
It's truly brilliant, Koby. It moves us from the theoretical risk to proven risk. If SafeBreach Helm runs a simulation and the attack is blocked, the priority of that exposure drops. If the attack succeeds, it moves to the top of the list. That's the ultimate filter for a busy security team.
Absolutely.
Right. And at the end of all of those steps, of course, now granted, we always have to see that our security tools work, which is why validation is becoming really the bedrock that all of CTEM is on, whether you're using CTEM terminology or not, right? If you have a security stack that isn't working for you, then what's the point?
And we'll be right back.
But ultimately, we want to get to a point where you actually mitigate, right? And that's what we call the fifth pillar of CTEM, which is mobilization. That's where the rubber meets the road. It's where you get things fixed. Koby, why is this the point of friction if we've already done the work beforehand?
That's a great question. In one word, communication. Think about the different owners within a very large organization of different assets of different security controls. And the idea is with mobilization that I want to drive those changes with the relevant team. Remediation often fails because IT doesn't understand why or the how. Why do I need to fix this and how do I do it? And it's a big gap that we have. There's a lot of disconnection between the tools and how to get the issues resolved essentially.
Makes sense. SafeBreach Helm, because it's connecting everything together, fixes that translation and the fragmentation. So you have everything in a single pane of glass.
Exactly. Two things to mention here is SafeBreach Helm builds on our existing error remediation capabilities. So we also leverage LLM specifically to understand what needs to be done when a simulation is not being blocked or is not being prevented by the security control. So combine the error remediation capabilities with our ability to drive workflow changes, integration with Jira, with ServiceNow, and to really make sure that the IT person, whoever is owner of a specific security control, knows what he needs to do and how to remediate. That's a very powerful tool we have to close the loop here on the CTEM cycle.
It provides the adversarial evidence. When IT asks, why do I need to do this now? SafeBreach Helm provides the validated simulation result. It shows them the movie of the attack it just blocked or allowed. That level of clarity mobilizes teams faster than any PDF report ever could.
Right. I mean, all in all, it sounds like SafeBreach Helm is the missing piece of the CTEM puzzle. It's putting everything together in a way that's clear and easy to understand, and most importantly, taking the continuous part of CTEM seriously and making it easier than ever before to operationalize CTEM. But before we move on, I'm going to throw you to a curveball and ask you one last thing. What would you say are the advantages to Helm of someone who's not looking at it through a CTEM lens yet?
So what CTEM provides is a framework to crystallize activity that you may be doing parts of, but you may have gaps. And it's not the only way to look at things, but just like the old joke about standards is, the great thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. And CTEM is a framework which gives us a consistent way, a philosophy, if you like, a strategy of approaching this challenge in cybersecurity.
Fair enough. Koby, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, with proactive security, you can decide how much to implement. So Helm by itself really provides you the framework to implement CTEM. But again, every organization will do the adjustment and adoption in a different way based on the needs and specific requirement they have.
Okay, and you'd say that would be the goal then of SafeBreach Helm ultimately.
Exactly. Think about SafeBreach Helm as a starting point. Really helps you on the day-to-day in terms of the validation, mobilization, those aspects. But where we're going to be very soon into 2026 is to really orchestrate this entire process we described on this call.
As an offensive engineer, I can tell you that the days of hiding in the noise are coming to an end. SafeBreach Helm.
Finally.
And well overdue, Koby. SafeReach Helm sees the big picture way too clearly.
Okay, Koby and Adrian, thank you so much for being here on this episode of the Cyber Resilience Brief. To our listeners, if you're ready to take the wheel of your exposure lifecycle and do the driving, it's time to look at CTEM by SafeReach, time to look at SafeReach Helm. Go to the website. You hear it at the outro to the show. Take a look. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, Tova. Thank you for having me today. Thank you, Adrian.
Catch you on the next breach, Tova and Koby.
It's always a pleasure to have you. And until next time, listeners, stay safe with SafeBreach.
The Cyber Resilience Brief is a SafeBreach podcast. Executive produced by Adrian Culley and Tova Dvorin. Music produced by Sar Dresner. Hosted, edited, and compiled on Riverside. For more about SafeBreach and how you can validate your security controls across your entire IT infrastructure, visit us at www.safebreach.com. That's www.safebeach.com.